Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lillian Sparks Robinson. My Lakota name is Wanakshtawi, which means flower woman. I'm the daughter of Leroy and Georgeline Sparks of Baltimore, Maryland, and the granddaughter of Vernon and Thelma Sparks of Annapolis, Maryland, and Lillian Poor Thunder Badhand and George Brushbreaker of South Dakota. It is my honor and pleasure to be here with all of you today as we join and celebrate the First Peoples Fund for this momentous occasion of our 25th anniversary celebration, We the Peoples Before. Our mission at the First Peoples Fund is to honor and support the collective spirit of First Peoples artists and culture bearers. Our work recognizes the power of art and culture to bring about positive change in Native communities, beginning with individual artists and their families. I have been privileged enough to serve as a consultant to the First Peoples Fund over the past 12 months on this particular event. And it is my honor to welcome you to the Tribal Languages and Arts panel. This is a story the First Light remembers. I am very happy to have the pleasure of introducing our session today, which includes panelists that are historic in nature. We have the first Native American chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and the first African American and Mexican American woman chair of the National Endowment for the Arts. At this time, I would like to welcome Deborah Rutter, president of the John F. Kennedy Center, to provide special remarks.
Thank you so much, Lillian. It is a thrill to welcome you here for not just this panel, but for these days of gathering, conversation, celebration, and performance. It is particularly thrilling for us to be gathered for this first conversation in what we have named the Justice Forum here at the Reach, and how appropriate for us to launch these experiences these days together. I want to start by acknowledging that the Kennedy Center stands on the land of the Nutcochunk and the Piscataway peoples, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have been the stewards of this land throughout generations. This 25-year celebration with the First Peoples Fund is a really important part of what we believe in here at the center. The cultural center, your cultural center, the United States Cultural Center, which is a part of the conversation to have today, works not just to be a performing arts center, but to be a safe place for all people, communities, and art forms. And we understand that we have a role to advocate for positive cultural and social impact through art. Just a couple of years ago, as we were all experiencing an international trouble through the pandemic, it was a part of the reckoning that we experienced, that we really began to reflect and think about an ongoing series of long-term social initiatives that change the way we talk about the work that we do and the way we interact with our community. This collaboration with the First Peoples Fund is a project that comes out of that period of time. It comes from a long-standing set of dialogue that we have had with the nonprofit, and it is particularly heartwarming and important for us to conclude this performance season here at the last day of June with a takeover with this celebration for these days. So I feel like I am probably the one person over these days who will be experiencing this all fresh, because I have supported and understood and listened to the conversations about the creation of these days, and my team have dedicated a huge amount of heart, brain power, and energy towards creating these days. But I feel like I am being given a special gift to be able to participate in all of the programs during these days. This collaboration is intended to celebrate a wide variety of facets of Native culture, tradition, and the arts, and it is meant to be reflective and forward-looking at the same time. There are events throughout this weekend, all of them in yellow, which means you are going, Deborah Rutter, in my schedule from now through the weekend. I hope you all feel that same level of excitement and anticipation. The Kennedy Center is a big place. We call it a campus, but this is really from the north to the south side of this campus, but reaching far beyond just the physical location that we are here. The gathering of people from all over our world to be here for this conversation and these experiences is so important. I'm not sure how much you have already been around the campus yet, but we are very proud that we have more than 100 tribal national flags on display in a space that we call the Hall of States, hanging alongside the flags of our states and territories. This week, we are celebrating the diversity of culture, language, and arts that flourished across this region, this North America region, long before this territory came to be known as the United States, and long before those other state flags ever existed. The Kennedy Center is committed to ensuring that we not only bring art into the lives of all Americans, but that the art that we present on our stages is inclusive of all Americans. We want our artists to not just perform on our stages, but to have a voice in curating what is put on our stages. And we want to give artists a platform to tell stories that are sometimes difficult, but crucial for all in our country to hear and experience. The collaboration between the Kennedy Center and the First People Fund has been a long time coming and a long time in conversation. And while we've had a few delays because of COVID, we are thrilled that we are here today to kick it off and to be together and to celebrate Native cultures, traditions, and art forms. So I'm thrilled to be here, sitting in the front row, not something I normally do, just to say, to focus on this first panel on Native languages and the initiatives to retain and revitalize those languages and the significant role and impact that language has on culture. So I want to say thank you to our panelists and moderator. Thank you again to all of our friends who are here and who have helped put together these days. I think there might be another introduction, but I would just like to start by saying thank you first to Hope McDonald Lonetree, who serves as Deputy Commissioner for the Administration for the Native Americans at HHS and who will speak and also be our moderator. Ben Grignon, Native Language Practitioner. Dr. Maria Rosario Jackson, who serves as the chair of the NEA, and Dr. Shelly Lowe, who serves as the chair of the NEH. So thank you, everyone, for today and for all that you do.
Yat shakea do shedene she Shelly Lowe yenishe Belagana neshle nanastage tachini bashachi Belagana dashache do trabaha dashanale lo cantiel de nasha do Cambridge, Massachusetts de Shigan. My name is Shelly Lowe. I'm Navajo. I'm originally from Ganado, Arizona. I'm currently the 12th chair, first Native American, second female of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Thank you very much. I am super delighted to be here in this position talking to you today. I currently live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, on the traditional homelands of the Massachusetts tribe. I want to thank everybody for being here today. A special shout out to some of my former students who are in the audience. I'm so excited to see you. And I will call you out later. And I want to say thank you, Lillian, and thank you everyone at the First Peoples Fund, the Kennedy Center, and the We the Peoples Before Program Committee for bringing us together today. It is truly, truly wonderful to see Indigenous poetry, history, music, culture, and storytelling taking center stage and being a part of everything here at the Kennedy Center. I want to talk about a little bit about our organization. The National Endowment for the Humanities, also known as NEH, is an independent federal agency and one of the largest funders of humanities programs in the United States. Together with our sister agency, the National Endowment for the Arts, who you will also hear from, we were established in 1965 by an act of Congress to support high-quality humanities research, education, and public programs. These programs would strengthen the country's humanities institutions and communicate the importance of history, literature, philosophy, linguistics, and other humanistic fields to the American people. Our grants support museum exhibitions, documentaries, podcasts, the preservation of important historical collections, college curriculum projects, professional development opportunities for teachers, advanced humanities scholarships, and a whole lot more. The issue of tribal languages and the importance to arts, culture, and community is of immense personal and professional importance to me. As I stated, I grew up on the Navajo reservation in rural northeast Arizona, and the history, the traditions, the values that I carry with me were formed through my childhood there. And although I absorbed plenty of Navajo culture at home, at school, in the community, at church, and from the many families that were a part of my small community in Ganado, Arizona, I will remain a lifelong and continuing Navajo language learner. While my parents grew up in the generation hearing Navajo spoken fluently at home by elders, by family members, my generation had an emphasis on speaking English, and speaking only English, and speaking English well, both at school, at home, at church. The Navajo I heard as a child came through listening to conversations among grandparents and elders, or in the words and prayers that we did have at church. It wasn't until I left Ganado for the University of Arizona that I had the opportunity to formally study the Navajo language. And I know, compared to so many other tribes, the Navajo Nation is fortunate that we still have many speakers for whom Navajo is their first language and the language that they speak at home. On this continent, the history of Indigenous language is one of erasure and loss, both through episodes of brute force and through slow erosion. Tribal groups across the country continue to feel the long-lasting impact of forced removal from their homelands, laws that prohibit the use and teaching of Native languages, and the forced assimilation of Indigenous children at Native American boarding schools, a report that many of us have recently read. In many communities, our elders are the only remaining Native speakers of tribal languages, and younger generations may feel as though they need to leave behind their Native culture and languages in order to seek economic and educational opportunity. When we lose a language, we lose all the knowledge, the history, and the values of that culture that are embedded in that language. Our languages are rooted in the places we call home and our identity as a community. The product of ideas and experiences of generations after generations of our ancestors, languages are living things and carry in them the spirit of our peoples. I know that many Indigenous words have no equivalent in English because the beliefs and ideas they express come from an entirely different tradition and way of thinking about the world. And I will say that it had always amazed me how many words there are for snow in Tlingit language. I love snow, and I wish I could describe snow in that many words, but the English language doesn't allow me that. At the National Endowment for the Humanities, we fund numerous initiatives that support the documentation, preservation, and revitalization of Native languages. Through a 17-year partnership with the National Science Foundation, NEH and NSF's Documenting Endangered Languages program funds linguistic fieldwork, research and analysis, and the preparation of materials on the thousands of languages across the globe that are at risk of loss. Through this program, NEH has funded the creation of a Penobscot dictionary, the documentation of dialects spoken by different communities of Mississippi Choctaw, and the development of a Hawaiian spoken language repository, among many other projects. This program is also helping save and reclaim some of the cultural knowledge encoded in Indigenous languages, such as a project surveying Indigenous community languages in Mexico about their knowledge and use of local plants in cooking and in medicine. This project is producing both materials to help in the revitalization of tribal languages, but also preserving traditional ethnobotanical knowledge for scientists. NEH also partnered with the First Nations Development Institute in Colorado to provide financial support to approximately 4 native language immersion programs across the country. This initiative has helped strengthen tribal-led programs, transmitting language and culture to new generations of Nez Perce, Salish, Crow, Lakota, Ojibwe, and Native Hawaiian speakers. NEH grants also help Indigenous groups preserve their cultural heritage and share their stories with the American public. Through a partnership with the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums, NEH distributed $3.6 million in American Rescue Plan recovery funding to 84 Native cultural organizations, including language programs, tribal preservation offices, community centers, and museums across 25 states to help them retain staff and maintain programs to preserve and bring awareness to Native American cultural heritage. NEH education grants to Nebraska Indian Community College and Little Bighorn College are supporting a curriculum initiative based on the work of Native American ethnologist Frances LaFlesche and the collection of oral histories of the post-World War II generation of Crow tribe members for use in humanities courses. The NEH infrastructure grants are enabling the Confederated Tribe of Coos Lower Umpqua and Susla Indians of Oregon to construct a tribal museum and cultural center, and preservation grants to the United Kituwa Band of Cherokee in Oklahoma. And the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation in Connecticut our funds are helping these nations preserve and curate collections of importance to community history. Other NEH funding supports collaborations between tribes and Native historians and researchers and large institutions to help educate the broader public about Native history, such as an NEH-funded permanent exhibit at the Heard Museum in Phoenix on the history and legacy of American Indian boarding schools that has been adapted into a traveling exhibit that will be displayed in small communities in all 50 states through 2025. NEH also funded the first major traveling exhibition of artwork by Indigenous women, Hearts of Our People, Native Women Artists, which honored the achievement of over 115 artists from the United States and Canada, spanning over 1,000 years, opened at the Minneapolis Institute of Art in the summer of 2019, before traveling to the First Museum in Nashville and the Renwick Gallery here in Washington, D.C. It finished its tour in 2021 at the Philbrook Museum of Art in Tulsa, and unfortunately this was an exhibit impacted by COVID. As NEH chair, my priority is to expand opportunities for all Americans to participate and benefit from humanities-based research, education, preservation, and public programs, and to make sure that the agency's grant programs and the projects we fund reflect the full and rich diversity of this country's histories, voices, experiences, and cultures. Throughout my time at the agency, I look forward to working closely with tribal groups and institutions to make sure that Indigenous voices and stories are heard, and that the languages they belong to remain living, spoken languages. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm so honored to join you today and take part in this beautiful and deeply meaningful event. And I want to thank the conference organizers for inviting me. The invitation came a long time ago from Lori Poirier, and I was excited back then. I know it was postponed, so the excitement continued to build over time. It's a great privilege to share the stage with Chair Shelly Lowe and with Ben Grignon. I'm grateful to all of you in attendance for your work to preserve, reclaim, and celebrate Native language and the arts. When I was invited to this gathering, I was excited to be in fellowship with you, eager to share some thoughts about work underway, but mostly eager to listen and learn and understand how we at the NEA can build on current work underway, but how we can be of greater service. I want to offer a little personal background that helps situate my role and lens at the NEA, and what I hope to advance in the time that I have working from that particular perch. For the better part of 30 years from different perches, my work has been at the intersection of arts and comprehensive community development and urban planning. And my focus has been on addressing historic injustices and building communities where all people can thrive. So my commitment to the arts started at home, and it started early. My dad, who retired from the U.S. Postal Service, and my mom, who worked for the Los Angeles Unified School District, they looked to the arts because they wanted my brother and me to be proud of our heritage and where we came from, and to know where they came from. And they were afraid that if they didn't find a way to intervene, the narratives that we would hear about African Americans and Mexicans would harm us, that we would miss the parts that taught us about how people like us were capable of the highest expressions of humanity. They resorted to artists and culture bearers to make sure that we knew that they could tell their story from their perspectives. People who had agency over their own narrative became very important to my parents. And they wanted us to be proud. They also wanted us to be curious about others and able to recognize differences as well as our common humanity. So I grew up with this sensibility, and I always felt that this is part of what we needed to thrive. So eager to find a way that I could contribute and take the baton and advance the purpose that was instilled in me by people before me, I landed in my root fields of community development and urban planning. And I didn't see the arts as separate from this. I saw it as central to that work. Early in my career, it became clear to me that not everyone agreed. And early on, I had colleagues who discouraged my focus on arts and culture, and they would say, you care about injustice, you want to address racist structures and improve neighborhoods, why are you doing this arts and culture stuff? As if it was off mission. And the questions annoyed me, but I remained committed. And I didn't have the words early on in my career to explain myself, but over time I found the words. And what I've been able to say for a long time now is that if you look around the world and throughout the ages in strategies to disempower, the first thing that is tampered with is one's humanity. Our ability to make meaning on our own terms, to ask questions, to have aesthetics, to express creatively, to connect to ancestry, to connect to the divine, to do the things that we do through art, culture, and this includes Native language. So, if it's so powerful that it has to be tampered with in order to control or oppress, to disempower, then why don't we think of it as core to building? So this insight is something that's grounded my work over the course of my career, and it's central to the work that I'm seeking to advance as chair at the NEA. So I'm excited about what we can accomplish in the next few years, and I'm happy that we're not starting from scratch, and I'm still in the process of learning what we have to build from. I know that the NEA has been increasing its engagement with Native communities and tribal leaders over the past 6 years especially, and in an effort to better serve these communities and help lift up Native languages and culture. In 2016, the NEA was invited by the Oglala Sioux tribe to participate in community roundtables focused on building youth fluency in the Lakota language and cultural traditions. Through this work, the NEA entered into increasingly closer communication with tribal leaders and with leading Native arts and cultural organizations, including First Peoples Fund, Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, and the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums. Leaders stress the importance of showing up in Native communities and at Native-led convenings. They also stress the importance of listening and developing responsive strategies to serve Native constituencies as well as tribal governments. In February of 2020, the NEA held a first-of-its-kind national convening, co-hosted with the NEH and Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, focused on Native arts and humanities. And this convening produced an important summary report and recommendations from Native arts leaders, including strengthening Native leadership, amplifying truth-telling, and advocating for equitable resources for Native artists and culture bearers. In April of 2021, we co-hosted a national convening with the Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums, which examined the state of arts infrastructure in Indian country. And in the same year, NEA carried out 2 tribal consultation sessions and published the NEA's first ever tribal consultation policy. The consultations, convenings, and listening tours with Native arts organizations combined with NEA's visits to tribal communities have had one common thread. The Native language preservation and practice of Native arts are lifeways and are of highest priority. Indeed, they're understood as central to the well-being of Native youth and the wellness of the community, both in present and future. Our outcome of these convenings was that Native artists and leaders identified the need for tribal arts councils. In response, ATOM, with the Ford Foundation support, has just launched a new program that supports 7 pilot tribal arts agencies. NEA and NEH are pleased to be engaged with this infrastructure building initiative, and I really see this as an opportunity to not just duplicate what has happened at local arts agencies around the country. There's an opportunity to build something here that embodies the values expressed at this convening. And this can be something that other local arts agencies can learn from and be inspired by. We're proud to be signatories of the Interagency Memorandum of Agreement on Native Language Preservation, and we're grateful for the partnership of ANA and NEH. This year, the NEA introduced the Equity Action Plan for fiscal years 2022 to 26, and this plan builds on continued efforts to expand community engagement, inclusion, and equity with the arts for people of all socioeconomic backgrounds, sexual orientations, and ethnicities. So this includes efforts to continue to engage and break down barriers with Native communities and tribal colleges and universities. So there's a bit to build from, and I'm still learning about what all of that adds up to and what it can catalyze. But we're excited and hopeful and driven by what's next in our Native work and work in Native arts and communities. And I'm excited to consider this in our particular context now. So as I advance the idea of artful lives for all, the importance of arts and culture at the intersection of health and community development, environment, and other areas, and as a dimension of communities where people can thrive, the last 2 years, to say the least, have been challenging, with the pandemic, heightened racial reckonings, social and political polarization, global instability, environmental changes. And it's been and continues to be an extraordinary time full of trials and tragedy, but also full of strength and possibility. So our creativity and imagination have allowed us to respond, adapt, and step up. And as we've had to adjust, readjust lifestyles, reimagine work, and reconsider what it means to care for each other as a nation, the last 2 years have taught us that in some cases we don't have to do what we've always done. And I keep thinking that the missed opportunity is if we just snap back. There's an opportunity to do something better, to do something different. And in the last 2 years, I think we've also been taught something about what is essential, what's not negotiable, what's core to who we are and who we want to be. So in this context, I'm excited about what is possible at the NEA in collaboration with you. And again, I'm so thankful for you having included me today.
Also, Luiswan Ben Grignon, Watnaway and Ekayan, Mawao Nitotam, and Kaish Mamachitawak, Nate Pamatasewak, Wavan Kitan and Maonikako. My name is Ben Grignon. I'm known as Watnaway to my people. That means the lightning off in the distance that's flashing. And I'm of the Wolf clan. And my people are the ancient movers, the Menominee, as we're called today. We're located in Wisconsin, and being able to say those words has come with a lot of trial and tribulation throughout the years. My parents did not speak the language. My grandparents, that generation, felt it was better for them not to learn, because it would make it easier on them, and that connection was lost, right? And we've heard that. Probably every one of us has that same story to tell. And so, in my generation, we're kind of a generation that is working on revitalization, of bringing that language back and bringing those connections back, bringing those stories back, bringing the art back. I'm a traditional arts teacher at a high school in Keshena, Wisconsin, on the Menominee Reservation. Being a traditional arts teacher, it's probably unique in the entire state of Wisconsin. I don't think there's another program in a public school that has a traditional arts program. Because it's a Menominee traditional arts program, I'm probably the only certified teacher in the entire world, right? In 2019, I received the Wisconsin Teacher of the Year, High School Teacher of the Year. This is the first time an Indigenous person has gotten that award in Wisconsin, but it wasn't the last. The next year we had another. And so I feel like being in those spaces and opening those doors is allowing us to have a different voice in the teaching, in what we teach, how we teach, the things that we find important to place into our classrooms. I am here as part of the First Peoples Fund. I was an education fellow, and I'm working with a number of other teachers from across the country on developing a curriculum based on what's happening here at this program. And I know how powerful that is, how needed it is as a teacher in the classroom with absolutely nothing to draw on except for our culture and our language. Having a curriculum that is dedicated to people who do performance art, who do language, and really have an understanding of the history of our people as Indigenous people, not just Menominee people, but all of us. We have a shared common history, shared common trauma, and a shared resilience, because we're here doing what we're doing today. I'm working on my doctorate degree through the University of Wisconsin Green Bay on First Nations education. This is the very first doctorate program at the University of Wisconsin Green Bay. And I've had the chance to have conversations with some amazing, amazing people. And we're really working on changing how we approach education. So for the last year, my wife and I are here today with our daughter. And so, because of the pandemic, she left the classroom. Felt it wasn't safe enough because our community that she was teaching in was not following protocols, was very anti-masking in the school, and it wasn't safe, especially because we have a newborn daughter. And so she's teaching differently. She's teaching out of our homestead. We have a little farmstead in Wisconsin, and we're working on creating a farm that's based on traditional Menominee agriculture that we see in our forest. The archaeological sites that show us how our people developed agriculture and how we did agriculture throughout these generations, but was lost. So we're on a process of discovery, finding out what works, what doesn't work, what seeds are important, what seeds work well, what are the seeds that are part of our kind of a greater Great Lakes trade network. And really like building community beyond that, looking at other indigenous agriculturalists, indigenous farmers. And the work that we do is super important. I believe that it really trickles down into what we do, like for me in my classroom. I am, like I said, like a year ago, I stepped out of the classroom as well. And I took on a new role within our district. We applied for a charter school to work with immersion. We've been under the ANA, we've been developing teachers over the last 4 years, I believe. Our language was so close. They titled it nearly extinct. We had less than 5 original speakers left, and because of the program that we developed to create teachers, we now have 39 teachers that are able to teach in our classrooms, and because of the social networks and things that we have on the reservation, we have 2 of those second language speakers that have become parents of our very first language speaker. So, and without people like these fine women up here, without people like you, without people like me, none of this is going to work well, right? We all have to work together as a community. We have to come together and learn from each other. One of the things that I did during the pandemic, when my classroom was empty, before I left to do the Kakena Wapatat, which is sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. I'm so excited about what we're doing. So I took that year off, right? And I'm working on this charter school. It's called Kakena Wapatat, and it's in our language it means we learn from observation. And it's not just learning, right? Our languages are so rich and so powerful that it doesn't just translate to we learn through observation. It's really about like the spiritual, the emotional, all of these things that are included in learning. And so we have this school that we've been developing over the last year. And it starts in the fall. We have 32 students enrolled. We have 2 teachers that went through the program, Menominee Language and Culture Commission program. And they also have their teaching degrees, and we're also working on getting them certified in Montessori. So this classroom is going to be different, right? So part of what I've been doing over the last years is looking at documents that I've collected since I was at the University of Arizona through the Knowledge River program. I'm a kind of a digital archivist, so I've been pulling Menominee resources from everywhere. I come out here and I work in the National Museum of the American Indian Archives out in Suitland, all of these different places to bring whatever Menominee knowledge I can back, things that were lost, things that we need to reconnect to, and create a kind of like a database for our teachers. Wow. It's so hard. It's so hard to do. It takes so much time, and the work is so. It's just now coming to like fruition. We're actually being able to use these resources now because we're able to look at what we need in the classroom. We're going from teaching the language to teaching in the language, which is a hard thing to do, right? We don't have a lot of the words. Aren't there for us. We're looking at what are the math words that we need, what are the science words that we need. In my capacity as a traditional arts teacher, we have all the words, right? We have all those things that we need, so it's rather easy. So now we're looking at like these abstract concepts and figuring out how we're going to do that. So a lot of it is observation, right? Kakena Wampatat, we learn from observation, not just our children, but us as the next generation of teachers who are moving into that teaching in the language. How are we going to look at what we do with our kids to help them understand their Menominee worldview? If I went back to my original ancestor and asked them about anything, if I had all the questions that a 4 or 5-year-old had, how would they learn? How would that original ancestor teach our kids, right? So now looking forward, how are we going to reconnect to that? How are we going to observe what's going on in the classroom? How are we going to observe what's going on in the art rooms? How are we going to bring those all together and then not only bring these 32 kids forward, but bring our whole community in? And it's really has to do with those little ones. They're going to be the teachers. So how do we take the what they're learning and create teachers out of them? Because that's the key. Those little bitty ones, they are going to be the most amazing teachers that we've ever had in our lives, right? They're going to be the ones that understand the language in a way that we'll never understand because they're growing up in it. They're going to understand things that There's a quote about we're not raising children, we're raising elders. So we're creating the elders that we wish that we had, that would have taught us the language, that would have taught us our culture, would have taught us the arts. So I think I'm going to stop there because there's so much more to talk about, right? And I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with these fine women here and with all of you. So I went in.
Good afternoon, Yate. She Hope McDonald Lonetree and Shia. Chodachini Nishle, Hashkahatzo Bashachin, Nathlana Edishache Ado Batana Edishanella. I was born and raised on the Navajo Nation in southwest of the United States. We are geographically the largest tribe, but also just recently population. We have exceeded Cherokee. So we really are a growing nation, and you probably all can guess that The average age are probably 16, 17, and 18. We're a very young nation, and so we have our work cut out for us, and I just really applaud each of you for joining us here today for these important conversations, because your interest is what we hope will energize the topics that we're talking about. We have some wonderful resources here with Dr. Lowe, and also, I have to pull it out, Dr. Rosario Jackson. And thank you so much for sharing your experience, Ben, as well. We really appreciate the lived experience on what you're doing. So it's a very important job. And so just a little bit of background. I am currently the Deputy Commissioner and Acting Commissioner at the Administration for Native Americans. We are primarily a grant organization, and our mission is to help with the social and economic well-being of Native Americans under HHS. I've been here just over a year, and it's been an exciting year, a lot of great things going on. We recently received $20 million in emergency ARP funding for Native languages, and that was the first time that we have disseminated non-competitive grants to the tribes. So we were able to serve 210 grants for those tribes who expressed interest in that. I've been on the phone with many of these tribes talking about what the impact and how it's going, and I will tell you that it's been very emotional for many of these tribes to have these grants to start some kind of language database, curriculum, teaching, reaching out to elders, capturing stories. All of these things are an important part of what we need to have, and so these conversations are ongoing. I expressed to Dr. Lowe here, we need to have conversations about, all of these programs and what they're building, so that we can help the tribal communities leverage their resources. So I'm not going to take a lot of time to talk about ANA, but I do welcome you and urge you to visit our webpage. We have a lot of grants that we offer, not just language, but social and economic development, environmental regulatory. Those are important areas that we'd like you to take a look at. We offer a vast array of technical assistance so that you'll be able to they'll help you as a pre-applicant, they help you navigate the system, and they help you throughout the grants process. So please take a look at our webpage. The one thing that I wanted to share with you today that I think is an important way of bringing performing arts into and merging it with language learning. I was a very, very young woman back on Navajo, and I was working at a high school who was just starting a program where the high school kids who were interested signed up for a class that they would step out of for about an hour. They were working together with foster grandparents, which were Navajo elderly, and they were writing plays. And what made it so unique is they wrote the plays with the topic and what it was going to be about, and the elders helped them translate that into Navajo. So they wrote the plays in Navajo, and they had to learn the Navajo language in order to act it and do the production, all of that. So we have here in this time, we had a lot of kids who didn't speak their language, but who were able to start learning it through the performing arts. And I will tell you that as wonderful and awesome as it was to have foster grandparents working directly with these high school students, to have them learn that respect. There were a lot of kids who didn't have that kind of relationship now, who would be able to connect with an elderly, to learn their relationships and the terms, the language, all of that. But one of the things also that I thought was really important about this program is that some of the kids that signed up, the teachers would come back and say, I don't know what you were doing in this program, but this young boy was at risk. He was ready to be expelled. He hardly showed up to class. He was doing drugs. He came from a family that there was a lot of alcoholism. But I will tell you, today, he sits in the front row. He raises his hand and he talks and participates in class. So whatever you're doing in this program, it is having a huge impact on this young man's life. And that was just one student. There were other students who were similar and who were growing through this program by learning about who they were, the language, connecting with others. And as you heard me introduce myself and others here, we introduced ourselves by clan. When we do that, we make it known to everyone in the audience who we are and how we are connected to you. And so in Navajo, when you hear somebody's clan, you know how you're related to them. So when the kids go through this program, they learned that Susie is their sister. They learned that John is their brother or their uncle. And so that helped them connect throughout the school year with each other to become a family. And it really helped them to have better relationships, to learn how to articulate how they were feeling and be able to be more confident. And so this one gentleman that I just talked about, he graduated from high school, which was an amazement to all of the teachers who had him for 4 years. But I saw him years later, and he came up to me and he said, I graduated from high school. I went to a trade school. He said, and I now own a home in Phoenix. And so these are fantastic programs. And so as we sit here and learn about languages and how important it is, and how awesome you have some wonderful funding resources, people who believe in the program, please, I urge you to be creative on what we can do with our young people and how important it is for them to learn how to connect in this day and age. It's all digital. And I have 3 children. I have my last teenager or child at home. I'll let you know if I survive this last teenager. But it's a digital age, and it's very hard to pull them away from the computer, from the telephone, from the tablet. And so it's all the more reason that I urge you and encourage you to think creatively about what we can do to save our children, to save our nations, to strengthen our culture, and to connect on a more human level, which is what our ancestors have taught us over the years. So I greatly appreciate every one of you that are here today with us. I encourage you to, if you don't see me later today, and I can't read all the letters for our webpage, but please Google the Administration for Native Americans and you can find our webpage there. But thank you again, and I'll get right to moderating this wonderful panel. Yeah. Okay, can you hear me? All right, so we're going to start off with a few questions for the panel, and the first one is, are there any best practices or examples in Indian country that we should pay attention to as it relates to demonstrating how the arts or cultural programming support Native language activities in communities? So I think I spoiled it by giving one example, right?
Poso, I'm a board member of a group that we've created on the Menominee Reservation called Menominee U, and it was created to create a community of language speakers that we would be able to go into, say, our wild rice season as a group, speaking the language and working with the kids, doing these projects, carving cedar ricing sticks and things like that. So this group came together and created a 501c3, and then pandemic things happened, and we were forced to change our programming so that we would be more of a digital. I think as educators, we're all very familiar with the Zoom process now, and so we've got these groups of language speakers who come together to learn the language, who are interested in the language. Menominee people who are all the way across the country can all gather together and do this this program. And I think the first run of people that we had we exceeded our Zoom limit. So there's over 260, I believe, people who are interested in doing the language. Yeah, I think that that process, that program, that community building is vital. It gathers all the people who are interested, all the people who are the major players in language, and now moving on, we're going to be able to get together and have places like where we could do moccasin classes, and sit and speak the language during that time, because that's the most important time. In my classroom, our kids, that are totally wild in other classes come into my class and are perfectly still and calm and ready to work, because we do create safe spaces for them. But I think it has a lot to do with the arts, with that connection, so that they're not only able to connect with the language, connect with the art itself, connect with our tradition, connect with our culture, but really connect with each other.
I think one of the examples through the National Endowment for the Humanities was our partnership with First Nations Development Institute and our ability to provide them $2.5 million that they then sub-awarded to tribal communities. So this was a way where federal agency and federal funds could be given to an organization that really did have the connections to tribal communities, really could get in and understand the work that they were doing from their perspective, right? So the tribes and the tribal communities building language programs, doing it the way that they needed to do it, not doing it based on federal guidelines of some sort, but saying these are the programs that we're running, this is how we're doing it, and First Nations Development Institute being able to say, these are great examples, these are great programs, we're then going to fund this money to you. And that's one example of using federal funds or a foundation who can come in and who finds a partner and says, you're doing great work, we want to help this in this arena, Native languages, how do we do this, and how do we come together and make sure that this is done appropriately? And that's just one example from NEH. But I think on a personal level, my children and I were watching Dark Wind last night. How many of you have watched Dark Wind? Yeah, that's right. See, if you're Navajo, you've been watching Dark Wind, right? And it's so amazing to sit there watching a show on AMC and they're speaking Navajo and you're getting English subtitles. And, I know Navajo, and a lot of people were complaining about how they were pronouncing words, and it was kind of rough sometimes. But my kids were like, Mom, what does that word mean? Mom, what is that? And we can sit there watching national TV and talk about language and talk about words and talk about how we're seeing them on TV, we're seeing them now in popular culture, right? And being able to support productions like that, being able to support work like that, and being able to say, this is a part of what we should be seeing on a daily basis. We should have Finding Nemo in Navajo and other languages. So fun to watch the sharks say hello in Navajo, I have to say. And our kids are like, yeah, Mom, I like this. This is so cool. But there are different ways that we can build and really support the use and just seeing and hearing Native languages on a broader scale and in a more contemporary avenue and arena, right?
Just a couple of additional thoughts. I think the idea of cross-generational work and apprenticeships is really important, and acknowledging that that's a very legitimate investment. Sometimes it's not taken as seriously as other ways of transferring knowledge or information, and it's such a critically important one, and I think we do some of that through programs at the NEA. The other program that comes to mind at the NEA is the Our Town program, and that's the integration of arts and culture into community development. And there have been some really wonderful examples in Hawaii, in Alaska, where there's evidence of the culture and the art of a community not being icing on the cake, but being part of the batter. Where it's fundamental, it's not ornamental, it is the heart of the building back of a community or the strengthening of a community. And when it shows up in that way, you can't ignore it. You have to address it. You have to understand its value in its fullness, because it's not separate from. it's fully integrated in. So I would look to apprenticeship programs and again, at least at NEA, the Our Town program, although there are lots of, I'm excited by the opportunity to reimagine the programs that we have and imagine paths, right? Imagine paths into existing things that might support in ways that we hadn't imagined before.
Thank you. Appreciate those answers very much. What is the one challenge to Native languages or arts, and how can we collectively address that challenge?
I would say one of the biggest challenges really is finding and being able to get funding and get large amounts of funding, right? Not just these small little grants that you can get. It's not easy. It's not easy to apply for federal funds. These are large grant programs. There's a lot that goes into the application. And this is an area and a topic that the staff at NEH and I are looking at. What are our grant application guidelines? What do they look like? What are the barriers for tribal communities, tribal organizations to applying to these large grants? They're doing really, really great work. We know they're doing great work, and they're having a really difficult time applying and showing the great work that they're doing within the application. And one of the things that we're trying to figure out is how do we take those successful applicants, tribal applicants in particular, and show other organizations, tribal organizations, what they've done, how they applied, how they're using their money, how they're reporting on the money that they use, because applying and getting the funds is just the first step. You have to then report on the funds that you get as well, to say, yes, you can do it. Here are the ways that we did it. Here are the things that we thought about. This is the information that we put into the application, because that really does make a difference. When you know someone who has applied, when you've seen what a successful application looks like. So part of that, and one thing that I encourage everyone here to do, if you run a language program, if you run cultural programs, if you work within your communities as a cultural bearer, a knowledge keeper, we encourage you to go online to the website and sign up to be a panel reviewer. And if you get chosen and invited to be a panel reviewer, it means you're going to read through the applications that get submitted to NEH. You're going to be the outside experts who are looking at every single application, assessing them, rating them, and moving them forward. And you get firsthand knowledge on what's out there, how applications are coming through, what they're focusing on, what a good application looks like, and what a not so good application looks like, to prepare you to either work with your organization and institution or to prepare yourself to then apply down the road. Having that firsthand experience and knowledge is really key to submitting a successful application. And you can find it if you just go to NEH and you Google panel reviewer. The form will come up, you fill it out online. But be a part of that process. Be active in that with us, and it really does help share the knowledge and the information out on a wider scale.
I'm really glad that Shelly brought up the panel process. Because it is, I know at the NEA we've tried and I think have made some good strides in making it accessible and having diversity in that panel process. And there's something really important about the conversations that happen in panel process and being able to understand the value of something from different points of view. And I think if the point of view that can interpret the full value of this kind of work isn't available in those settings, we're all the worse off for it, right? And part of the gap sometimes is being able to articulate not only the value to the community itself that is reclaiming that culture that is taking back something that was taken away, but also helping people to understand, even when they are outside of that culture, how they too are enriched by that. That diversity of perspectives, when you talked about the different ways of understanding or describing snow, it's sad that we don't have access to that or access to someone who can teach us that. So there are ripple effects that are, it's important to reclaim because it needs to happen, that should happen. And it's important also to understand how others benefit in the process. And if that perspective isn't available, we won't ever get that.
I think that one of the most difficult things that we're facing is how we're empowering the youth. They have the creativity, the drive, the need for language, for culture, for art. They have the ideas. They have these amazing ideas, and just look at TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. I don't know how to TikTok, but I enjoy watching the film. The videos they make, and they're powerful, right? They create something they create an avenue that helps other young people get into the language, appreciate the language, and the arts. So I agree. It's a mentorship kind of a thing, like helping these young ones understand how do we go about funding what you need to do, and getting them into the idea that it's cool to do these things and it's fun and if you had a funding stream, just think of the possibilities that you could do. And so it does help. It does help a lot. But I think empowering our youth is really what we need to start thinking about, especially with funding sources.
Thank you. And the last question is, what are some ways that we can encourage public and private partnerships to support these types of programming for language and the arts? I think you spoke a little bit about that, Shelly, but I know that we have many ways that we can do that.
Yeah, one of the newer programs that was brought back to NEH is the Challenge program, and these are large grants, but the requirement for these grants is that you have to have matching funds, that you have to have private matching funds. You could get state matching funds, but you couldn't match your funds with other federal funding. And this does really allow applicants to leverage the name of NEH and the funds and the resources from NEH to go out and say, we went through this very rigorous review process with panelists that have come from the public, with council members and staff, and we've been funded this money. We have a really great model here. We have a really great set of materials that explain our model. And then be able to say, we need matching funds. We need organizations to partner with us to match these funds. And pretty much all of the NEH applicants who receive these funds and get these grants are able to match those funds and those dollars. And, we're talking about 500,000, sometimes larger grant awards. But the really nice thing that NEH has done is for tribal communities, tribal organizations, tribal colleges and universities, the matching requirement is 1-to-1. For all other organizations besides HBCUs and now Native Hawaiian organizations, it's 4-to-1. They have to go out and they actually have to raise a lot more funding to match the NEH funding. But we're very aware and cognizant that some organizations, some communities just don't have that capacity, but you can still have a very large grant and just have to match it 1-to-1. And we're thinking about how to expand how our resources get used, but also how to really leverage, an award from federal agency like NEH to say, this is really great, and you can be able to then use that to go out and solicit more funds and get more support for your projects.
At the NEA, one of the things that I'm very interested in advancing and interrogating further is the idea of local arts ecosystems and how organizations connect to each other and can leverage. We think of, I'll speak for the NEA, a lot of times the National Endowment for the Arts is understood primarily as a grant maker, which for sure it is, but there are other ways that it can show up as a national resource, and there are other currencies that it has in addition to the grant resources, right? So there's an opportunity to catalyze, to have a platform, to make that platform available for thought leadership, to connect, to convene. The idea of learning communities is something that I think is really important. and the role of the Arts Endowment in helping to bolster and support not just individual organizations, but that arts ecosystem, and how they work together. So I think that feeds into part of the answer to the question.
I think there are, in our work, we've seen quite a few nonprofits spring up, people who are working towards that language and culture through means other than a tribal organization or some other organization, a school district, for instance, and that maybe targeting some of those independent thinkers, those ones who are trying to find a way to do this work and have been disenfranchised by whatever, it could be their tribal group, it could be their school district, it could be any number of reasons, right? But they want to do the work. They want to figure out how to access those funds. And one of I guess their first step is a 501c3. So can we start targeting those groups?
Appreciate that, Ben. Really appreciate that. I know that there's a lot of dialogue that we could have with educational institutions and how we work with them and integrate them as strong partnerships. So with that, I know that we are coming towards the end of our panel today, and so I just wanted to ask, out of the three of you, do you want to have any final encouraging words for our audience here?
I say keep up the good work. And I think one of the last things that I would strongly encourage, one, check out our websites, check out his program, see what funding opportunities are out there, ask us questions, reach out to us if you have questions, but also know that every one of our state and jurisdictional areas also has a humanities council or an arts council, and these are organizations that you should be connecting to as well. They have funding, smaller pots of funding that you can apply to, but you should be getting involved and thinking about if you're interested serving as a board member on these councils. This is kind of a first step into getting involved and getting connected to us as federal agencies and seeing the work that we do, but having a voice, right? And having that expertise that we've often been lacking in some of these areas. We need you to be looking at applications. We need you to be looking at programs. We need you to be supporting and providing information. And you can start at that local, smaller level and hopefully move up into a much more national participation and national level.
So I certainly echo the invitation and the encouragement to participate in the processes that already exist and the paths that are already available. But I'll also go back to something I said earlier, which is, we're coming through a really extraordinary time that in some ways has afforded us the ability to stop, reset, and reimagine. So again, just I think the obligation to not just snap back, not just go back to romanticized notions of how things were, and think that that's what the aspiration should be now. Yeah.
Slowly losing the language and the fear that you don't have any ancestors to encourage people to learn. And I was thinking, it's just an idea, is there a way that this language, the authentic, the first language of this country, can be incorporated in elementary school, middle school, and I think it would be the coolest thing for children. Hey, I'm learning a native language of this country, and every second person there speaks Spanish. A lot of them speak French and German, what have you. But I feel that by doing that, you're not only preserving the language, you're actually getting the American people interested and inquisitive enough to want to learn.
One of the projects that we're doing at home is looking at our place names, names of cities, towns in Wisconsin. They're all have an Algonquin background, most of them, and so getting people to understand, like we did a land acknowledgement here. What is the name of your town? Where does that come from? What are the stories that are behind this? And who can we talk to? Who can we bring in to help share? And it really is about connecting those youth together, I believe. I'm biased as a teacher, but just getting them to think about where they're at, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Where are we?
Because I feel, because I'm a teacher, I teach English as a second language. I speak 4 languages. I'm from India, and I speak 2 Indian languages. Hindi, the national language, Urdu, which was derived from Farsi, Turkish, Arabic, Hindi, and I live in Brazil, so I speak Portuguese. And for me, languages, they are passion. And I'm now I'm learning Spanish, and I just feel that this is an idea that we can incorporate in the schools, and it'll be something new, something challenging, something completely different for the American students to take up and preserve the language.
Yes, please make sure that happens.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time. President Rutter, thank you. Our distinguished panel, Dr. Lowe and Dr. Rosario Jackson, Kahat, Ben, Grignon, really appreciate your expertise and lived experience important to what we do. And Lillian, what she didn't say earlier, she was the former commissioner at the Administration for Native Americans. Thank you, Lillian.